In the late summer of 1942, a quiet but momentous transformation was taking place in the fog-heavy airfields of England. Groups of young men, wearing the distinctive blue uniforms of the Royal Air Force, were making their way to London in ones and twos. They weren't there for leisure. They were there to reclaim their identities. These were the Americans of the Eagle Squadrons. For 2 years, they had flown under the British Union Jack, defending a country that wasn't theirs while their own nation remained officially neutral. To the United States government in 1940, these men were technically criminals, outlaws who had violated the Neutrality Acts. But by 1942, the world was a different place. The senior Eagle Squadron, number 71, had a logbook that told the whole story. Across its cover, someone had scrawled a simple, handwritten note. Now, number 334 Squadron, United States Army Air Forces. The handover was beginning. This is the documented archive of the men who fought for 2 flags, the rivalries that nearly tore them apart, and the daxshatli, terrible disaster at Morlaix that finally united them. The story of the Eagles begins long before the smoke cleared at Pearl Harbor. The first of the units, number 71 Squadron, was formed in September 1940 in the very heart of the Battle of Britain. At that time, joining the armed forces of a belligerent nation was a direct violation of the United States Neutrality Acts. Anyone caught trying to join the Royal Air Force faced a $20,000 fine, 10 years in federal prison, and the loss of their American citizenship. To escape the law, many of these volunteers crossed the border into Canada with forged passports and illegal documents. They kept their mouths shut about their true nationality, living in a shadow world of hidden identities. By the middle of 1941, so many Americans had smuggled themselves into England that the R.A.F. was able to form 2 more squadrons, number 121 in May and number 133 in August. For a year, they flew grueling convoy patrols and dangerous strafing attacks over occupied Europe. They were Americans in blue, waiting for the day their own country would finally join the fight. When the transfer to the American 8th Air Force was finally announced, the enthusiasm among the pilots was electric. While they respected their British comrades, the Eagles were tired of the British wartime reality. There were 2 primary reasons for their excitement: the food and the pay. The British wartime diet was a grim endurance test. The pilots were tired of bubble and squeak, a repetitive dish of fried cabbage and potatoes. Joining the American forces meant a return to the luxuries of home: real steaks, fried chicken, fresh fruit, vegetables, and genuine American coffee. But the biggest incentive was the money. The United States government paid its personnel between 2 and 3 times more than the R.A.F. A pilot officer in the British forces earned roughly $67 per month, or £16, 14 shillings, and 7 pence. In contrast, a second lieutenant in the American Air Force, the equivalent rank, received a staggering $162 per month. During one farewell party, a departing Eagle pilot couldn't resist mocking his British commander. He told him, "Wingco, as of now, I'm being paid twice as much as you, and I'm only a lieutenant. Too bad your accent isn't worth more pay." It was a time of boisterous transitions, as young men traded their R.A.F. blue for American khaki. Before they could officially wear the American star, every pilot had to face an examination board in London. The board included the heavyweights of the 8th Air Force, Major General Karl Spaatz and Brigadier General Frank Hunter. The process was simple. Pilots were questioned, then sworn into the U.S. forces with ranks that matched their R.A.F. experience. Flight lieutenants became captains, and squadron leaders became majors. But some pilots had grander ambitions. Squadron leader Carroll McCulpin walked into the room and calmly informed the generals that he should be promoted straight to brigadier general. He argued that the American forces were getting a seasoned combat leader and that a general's salary was a sound investment. He eventually allowed himself to be talked down to the rank of major, but the audacity of the Eagles was now legendary in both air forces. Not everyone was eager to leave, though. Squadron leader William Dunn, the first American ace of the war, was serving in Canada and had no interest in the transfer. It wasn't until he received a nasty letter from the Inter-Allied Personnel Board, implying they would come and get him if he didn't comply, that he reconsidered. The generous American pay finally tipped the scales, and he joined his countrymen in June 1943. While the world saw the Eagles as a unified force, the truth inside the hangars was much darker. A bitter, unfriendly rivalry had developed between the three squadrons. They didn't just dislike each other. They made no secret of their hostility. Number 71 Squadron, the senior Eagles, considered themselves the elite. They looked down on 121, whom they called the second-class citizens. In return, 133 was mocked as the juniors. The resentment grew to the point where the R.A.F. had to keep the three squadrons at separate airfields just to prevent them from fighting each other more than they fought the Germans. This rivalry reached a breaking point in August 1942 when No. 133 Squadron was issued the brand new Spitfire Mark IX. The Mark IX was a masterpiece of engineering, faster, more heavily armed, and designed specifically to kill the German Focke-Wulf 190. Only 3 squadrons in the entire R.A.F. had them. 133 used their new planes as a status symbol of superiority, driving the other 2 squadrons into a silent rage. They claimed they were number 1 among the Eagles, a claim that 71 and 121 absolutely refused to accept. On September 23, 1942, the American planners decided to force the squadrons together at a single base in Debden, Essex. They hoped the proximity would heal the rift. But 3 days later, a mission to the city of Morlaix, France, would change everything in the most terrible way possible. 12 pilots from 133 Squadron were sent to provide fighter cover for B-17 Flying Fortresses bombing a Focke-Wulf maintenance plant. The mission was plagued by errors from the start. The bombers arrived 20 minutes early and left without their escort. Ground control, under pressure from high-ranking officers looking for a publicity story, ordered the Spitfires to chase them. Then, nature intervened with a deadly secret. The pilots were told they were flying into a 35-knot headwind. In reality, they had flown directly into the jet stream, a high-altitude wind current that was virtually unknown in 1942. Instead of a headwind, they had a 100-knot tailwind. Combined with the incorrect estimate, the pilots were facing a 135-knot miscalculation. In 33 minutes, the Spitfires were blown over 100 miles off course. Because of a solid layer of gray clouds, the pilots had no idea they were still over German-occupied Brittany, thinking they were safely over England. When they dropped below the clouds to find a landing strip, they were met by a wall of anti-aircraft fire and a swarm of German Focke-Wulf 190s. Their fuel tanks were bone dry. They couldn't fight back. They couldn't run. Out of 12 Spitfires in 133 Squadron, all 12 were lost. 4 pilots were killed and 6 were taken prisoner. Only 1 pilot managed to crash land in England after running out of fuel. The junior Escadrone had been wiped off the map. The disaster at Morlaix was a tragedy, but it achieved what no general could. The news of the loss of 22 Spitfires across 3 squadrons sent a wave of shock through the Eagle community. The senior and second Eagles didn't mock 133 anymore. They felt only a deep, cold sympathy. The name-calling and the cutting remarks vanished overnight. They realized that the same jet stream, The same gray clouds and the same German cannons could have taken any of them. To prevent the rivalry from ever returning, the 8th Air Force mixed the squadrons together. 71 became the 334th, 121 became the 335th, and the shattered 133 became the 336th. On September 29, 1942, a formal ceremony was held to mark their exit from the R.A.F. Sir Sholto Douglas, the chief of R.A.F. Fighter Command, stood before the men. He had often been furious with their conduct in the past, but now he spoke with grace. He announced their final score. The Eagles had destroyed 73.5 enemy aircraft, the equivalent of 6 entire Luftwaffe squadrons. The half victory, he noted, was a bomber shared with a British pilot, a symbol of Anglo-American cooperation. As the Eagles became American pilots, they made one thing very clear: they were taking their Spitfires with them. They refused to fly American fighters like the P-40 or the Airacobra, which they considered inferior to the British masterpiece. This caused a massive embarrassment back in the United States. National magazines like Time reported that American pilots preferred foreign planes over anything made in the USA. It was a blow to national pride, but to the Eagles, it was a matter of survival. They knew that in the skies over France, the Spitfire was the only thing that could keep them alive against the Messerschmitts. Eventually, they were forced to convert to the massive P-47 Thunderbolt in 1943, and finally to the legendary P-51 Mustang in February 1944. With the Mustang, the former Eagles became the top-scoring American unit in the entire European theater. In just 2 months, they destroyed over 300 German aircraft. By the end of the war, their total score was a staggering 1,052.5 enemy planes. The young men who had once been considered criminals and outlaws by their own government ended the war as its greatest heroes. Their operational experience had been so desperately needed that the U.S. government conveniently overlooked their violations of the Neutrality Acts and restored their citizenship. 44 years later, a permanent memorial was raised in London's Grosvenor Square, a granite obelisk topped by a bronze American eagle. It stands in the most American spot in London, a tribute to the volunteers who didn't wait for a declaration of war to do what was right. The last entry in the squadron logbook tells of their final march. They didn't march off as the R.A.F. anymore. They marched as the 335th Squadron, their arms swinging straight, their heads held high. They passed out of the Royal Air Force and into the eternal halls of history. Their riotous, semi-independent career was over, but the legend of the Eagles was just beginning. If you found this archive of the Eagle Squadrons insightful, please support the channel by hitting the like button. Share this story of the volunteers who risked everything to fly. What is your perspective? Should the Eagles have been punished for violating the Neutrality Acts, or was their service worth the legal bypass? Let us know in the comments below. To continue exploring the deepest secrets of human conflict, subscribe to the War Archives and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep exploring the past.